Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to wind up after this session, the seminar, so I think CM will agree us to overshoot in time a little bit. We already overshot in time, another 5-10 minutes perhaps. I don't know why we ended up with the session with dilemmas in the end, because when I received this on email, I was also a little inquisitive, like Commodore Naresh Kumar said, or the other person here said that, why there's dilemmas. But let me tell you, dilemma in indigenization, it's in many hierarchical levels. You can have a dilemma in what technology to choose. You can have a dilemma in what project organization you want to have to progress with the indigenization. You can have a dilemma in what sort of configuration you want the equipment so that a scaled down version is on a ship, small ship, and a larger version is on a bigger ship. So you can have dilemmas at different levels. Even though there has been very specific saying that for legacy equipment, yes, I agree with you that legacy equipment perhaps didn't get enough attention in the selected lectures we had, but definitely whatever talks were there, they're all pertinent to different types of dilemma. Let's take dilemma of technology. Now what Commander Vambadkar talked about, electrical propulsion, is definitely a dilemma of technology. Want to do it or not, and I know it's been going on for the last 15 years, or perhaps even more. I went through it for 2-3 years myself under Admiral Jetli when he was COM. We saw it being inducted in the Royal Navy. We saw how it was being inducted. It's a huge induction process. It is, and for the scales of ships, number of ships you're going to have electrical propulsion, this technology is going to be perhaps may not be cost effective in the Indian Navy. This is what I feel, and I totally agree with what you had said. How many numbers are going to be there, because the technology is going to be very, very expensive. And let me tell you very clearly, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to imbibe the technology and try to put it on a frontline ship or even maybe an auxiliary ship, but don't put it on a brand new ship, because it is going to give you lots of teething problems. As we have had this romance with electrical propulsion for the last 15 years, and I don't see things going in a hurry other than imported version coming into the Navy. But definitely there's a challenge for the industry to participate in this import. Maybe they will have joint ventures, they will have a few of the I won't say components, few of the machinery being made in the country. Integration will be a problem, software development will be a problem in this. So all those things is an area where the Indian industry can participate. You can have dilemma in design paradigms. And I'm talking about what Mr. Datta talked about, having PLM concept being brought into right from the beginning. But I just want to assure this audience, where's Patnaik? Pat, yeah. We have worked together, and PLM has been in the Navy or associated with the Navy or a naval organization for last 7-8 years. We have built platforms with PLMs, and it's a wonderful tool, and I have seen it work, and I think that is something which the design directorate should definitely look at it. And I don't think there's any dilemma in this. You should go for PLMs based design, which will help you to seamlessly transfer your design drawings to the production unit, be it a shipyard, or it can be used even for equipment design to an equipment manufacturer. And it definitely brings in a lot of thinking about commonality, standardization, inventory management, life cycle costs being cut short. And I think it is a very, very efficient tool. And today the PLM, if at all, is being practiced in the examples which I didn't talk about, or what we had in common with Patnaik, is mostly in the brain of the designer. He knows so-and-so has to be used, or so-and-so equipment has already been inducted in so-and-so ship. So I think we need to move into a tool, a software tool, and I totally agree with what Mr. Datta said. I'm happy that Siemens is coming out with a very versatile PLM for ship design as well. So you can have, I don't think there's any dilemma in this. We should. When Madhusudan spoke about the dilemma in adopting strategies, and I think he was essentially centering on HR policies, you're essentially coming to HR policies, 5Cs, 7Cs, etc. There is one C which is hugely difficult for the Navy to ensure: career progression and continuity. It doesn't go well together in the Navy. You want good people for indigenization, and you say they should be working continuously on a project, or they should be available, like somebody had made a mention. Person starts it, and after a couple of years he gets transferred and the whole thing collapses, or the next person is not able to pick up. So you have a contradiction. There's a dichotomy between career progression and continuity in the Navy. You can't have both of it. And this, in fact, is a bane of many of the projects not getting successful. I'm basically addressing to what Mr. Joshi said, and Rajesh also said there. One of the reasons why we had successes in the programs which TCS and Gotraj was talking about, even though I felt very nostalgic about it, because I've been involved in both, is some of the people, some of the officers who were dealing with your cases had spent a lot of time, so they could give you hand-holding with a fair amount of stability. And that is, I think, that is a dilemma. I think this dilemma, I don't think we can solve very easily. There will be always this contradiction between continuity and career progression in the Navy. So if you have to look for a change in this, or you want to overcome this dilemma, then I would like to think what Dr. Rana said. You have to look at a different organization structure for indigenous projects. If you think that you have to invest in intellectual capital dealing with indigenous development or indigenous activity, then I think we need to look at organization structure or a career pattern, etc., which will enable these indigenization activities to go. Otherwise, the user's involvement will be weaker, and the critical catalyst for indigenization is a user involvement. If the user is not involved, it's not a question of just giving RFPs and some standards and some specifications across the table and tell him please quote and please make. It's not so. It has to be made to understand. He had to visit the site, we had to hold frequent reviews, frequent discussions, and all these are the extent of user involvement for this. And wherever the user is involved himself, it has been a success. And I think all of us, when we were in the Navy earlier, we used to talk about the best example for success has been APSO sonar, where you had Captain Paul Raj, then Captain Paul Raj, who was so much, and his team, so much involved in development of APSO sonar. And that's how we had the first underwater sensor being made in the country very successfully. So user involvement is a dilemma, and that has to be overcome for indigenous projects by some method or other. And I think Chief of Material will address this issue, because I for certain have been trying to address it during my days. We couldn't find an answer to it. We have to look at some out-of-box thinking into it so that we are able to do this. There is also dilemma in production and testing, and I think you mentioned it very briefly, and I don't know whether the audience caught on to it. Getting it right the first time. Now, this is a huge dilemma when you have an order which has come from the Navy for a very critical equipment, and the entire credibility of your industry is at stake if you don't complete it successfully under a simulated condition in the factory, because very often your equipment doesn't get tested to the field conditions or the sea conditions till it gets fitted on board a ship or submarine, and you had to wait for it for a long time because the platform may not be ready at that point of time. So getting it right first time is a challenge, and very often there's a dilemma for the user, because he has to very carefully develop the acceptance testing such that it is totally de-risked. I just want to share, since we talked about electrical propulsion, when I was at Admiral Kannan, we had seen how the electrical propulsion was being tested on land in a place called Weston in UK, where they had entire setup of the propulsion motor along with the software, and instead of obviously the propeller is not there, they had put some other load. So it was a user's requirement, demands to make sure an equipment is fully tested to the almost near field conditions, and I think that is a dilemma. And this can happen only if you address the user involvement process. So I come back to again what Dr. Kaban, Admiral Masuran said, that the HR which Navy is going to invest in indigenization units or indigenization activity is very, very crucial. And continuity is one part of it. Competency is another part of it. I agree with you. But you have to see the reality as well, what the system can give. So I'm very happy that we addressed many of the issues. But like Commodore Naresh Kumar said, but where is the dilemma regarding product support of legacy systems? Yes, there are problems in addressing legacy systems. There have been perhaps not a specific paper on that, but that's some questions and all, etc. had come. But let's look at it. If we have a legacy system which has come out of a indigenous manufacturer, I don't think we are that much worried. We are fairly comfortable because we are able to get across to the company and get them to give a revised version, an improved version, and we are able to do it. We have done it many times with HAL, with Bell, etc. But when there's an imported equipment, I think there is definitely a problem of supporting legacy equipment. And if you look at the spectrum of imported equipment, I think it is mostly Russian, and perhaps a few erstwhile Soviet Union equipment are still there. We definitely need to find an answer to, there's a dilemma there, how to find a solution for product support of legacy systems. Getting agencies who will take back defective equipment back to that country, getting it repaired and bringing back is not very much the answer. Plus, after the fall of Soviet Union, the Russian equipment which have been supplied to Indian Navy, both for, not both, for all three, in fact, for aircraft, surface as well as for submarines, the quality of documentation has become poor. So, the information which you can generate for the documents you have in our country makes it very difficult for you to have an indigenous solution for product support. It's a problem. Second, with digital technology having come in from mid of 90s, even in Russian equipment, many of their plug and play items, it's not possible for you to, it's possible for you to make the hardware, but it's impossible for you to decode the software. So you find it difficult to find a solution. So we have, genuinely we have a problem. And I think one of the solutions which the user service can examine is looking at replacing higher denomination of the equipment. Instead of trying to narrow down to modules and PCBs and plug and play items, look at higher denomination of equipment at a unit level, and if you know that unit level is going to do so and so function, find the indigenous equipment. In fact, it gives a bigger challenge to the industry to make it, as long as it is largely of the same size, you'll be able to still put on the platform. And if you're able to test it very effectively in the factory and later integrated with the equipment, I think we should be able to find more indigenous solutions rather than trying to chase smaller denominations. This is what I would like to suggest. But I have another point. Why have we landed up in this? And we seem to be continuing in the same line, because we have, of course, we have imported equipment, and therefore we have a whole lot of items which have come from abroad. tomorrow with more indigenization, whether Godrej supplies it or TCS supplies it, he is still going to supply a whole lot of items. And I won't be surprised if there is a power supply of which TCS uses is same as what Godrej is going to use, and both will have two different part numbers, stocked as two different items in our logistic organizations, thereby increasing our inventory carrying cost and not benefiting from the numbers we should actually benefit and enjoy in repair as well as in inventory. I think this is something which the user service has to look into. Is it possible for us, especially for inductions which are going to take place here and after, not for what has happened earlier, to identify suitable building blocks which you can specify in the RFP, so that whoever is quoting against that RFP has to necessarily use user-identified modules which are Indian. So if you have an Indian supplier for all the PCBs which are made as per whether they are processor PCBs or power supply modules or whether they're IO cards, which are all standard these days, anyway you're going to buy from abroad otherwise. If you make it in India, having the same number, the inventory becomes better, leaner, product support becomes better, and your component of indigenization also will be higher. But of course, a lot of work needs to be done by the user service to look into internal design of the equipment. It is very demanding, but it's worth attending, at least in certain areas, at least in electronics, it is possible to look at this aspect. I'm just leaving a food for thought for people who are steering the indigenization program. And lastly, which I would like to mention, is that out of all the aspects which have driven or not driven the indigenization process in the Navy, it has been the singularly most important aspect has been the involvement of the user. If you take the Leander program as an example, which happened in 70s, it is the people who were in Directorate of Leander project and also who were in DQAWP and who were in DQN who made sure we had huge indigenous component. You take the strategic program, there's a huge component of indigenization, huge activity of indigenization taking place. But if you look at the model, they have a dedicated organization, and I'm happy Srinivas you're here. There's a dedicated organization which drives it. So there is a need for it, for us to know that from our earlier examples, we are committed manpower, we allowed them to be there for longer period, and we also empowered them financially, which is what you're talking about, that we should have a different set of rules for indigenization. We also empowered this organization financially so that indigenization becomes a reality. This is what we see from our success stories. And every failure which has happened in indigenization, if you look back, it is invariably linked to the non-availability of the three things which I said by way of empowerment or by way of continuity or competence. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a wonderful experience to be here with you today. And I'm sure the takeaway from this is there for the industry as well as for the people who have organized this seminar. I for certain thoroughly enjoyed being back here, meeting erstwhile colleagues, erstwhile senior officers, and also some of my friends from the industry with whom I have worked for quite a number of years. I thank you very much, Vice Admiral Subedar, for having facilitated this. Very good, except that some of the questions, lurking questions were there on product support, and I'm sure the people in the staff in the Naval Headquarters would progress with some ideas which have got generated today. Thank you very much.